everyone. We have a name for this show. We finally came up with an actual name for the show, seeing as it looks like we're going to be doing these for a while. Welcome to the Wellness Naturally show with Anne, Cori, and Dani. And today we're going to talk about dun, 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 colds and flus, because everyone I know is like talking with the and the sniffles and the sneezing and the achiness and all the rest of it. So it was definitely felt like a perfect time to be delving into this topic. Hi guys, how you doing?
Hello, good evening. Nadia has a question. Dani, would you like to change the screen?
Change the screen how, Nadia?
Or maybe it's just my side. I can see all of our screens, not just the three of you.
No. It's okay on my side. I can just see the three of us. That's it. It's in something in your settings you have to go in and change. That is click off
the view. Click
show
on view
non-video participants. You have to turn that off so it doesn't show non-video participants. Right. So yeah, the cold and flu season. And I know people are like, oh, there's no such thing as a cold and flu season. But there kind of is, right? And it comes that when all of a sudden daylight changes and we're kind of living in dark and cold and we're not getting the vitamin D that we should be getting. And, you know, if you are a fresh fruits and veg person, it's a little more difficult to get the best quality at this time of year. So we're not eating as much that would give us the extra vitamin boost. And when everyone else is going around and getting sick and then we're hanging out, and yeah, it's kind of cold and flu season again. So I want to talk about, we've been discussing, Cori and Ann and I have been discussing this level, like how we're going to go forward. We're going to start off with talking about like our first aid aspects of it. What you do right away in order to nip it in the bud, but also to deal with those emergency symptoms, the fevers, the coughs, the sore throats, etc. So which of you ladies would like to start? And do you want to start off with the homeopathic, since that's what I kind of consider it for me anyways, that grab it first and go first aid?
Okay. Yeah, I hate starting these things, but anyway. It's one thing when you're teaching your own workshop and you know, but it's different in this kind of format. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is paradigm shifting or pattern breaking. Because when people start, we've been programmed to suppress everything our body's trying to do, to stop it, to go to work at all costs, to take antibiotics, to take painkillers, to take cough medicine and so on, so that we can do what, you know, the slave masters want us to do. And a big part of our deprogramming is stopping that. And it's extraordinary. It is extraordinary to me, even now, how difficult I find that sometimes. Last week, I had a really busy week. And one morning I woke up and felt, ugh. And I said, right, okay, so I can either put the job first or myself first. What's my choice? So my choice was to stay in bed. And that's something that we have been programmed out of, listening to the body and resting when the body needs rest. So what happens when you don't do that? You just keep pushing through. And I have to say, mothers are the worst. I would say the absolute worst. They keep everybody going except themselves. Well, they push and push and push themselves. If you keep stopping the body's attempt to detox and recalibrate, the body has no choice but to become sicker. It has no options at all. So that's one of the first things I find when people are starting to take control of their own health. You have to relearn how to use, how to hand over to your immune system and say, okay, body, I trust what you're doing. You're doing it for a reason. I'm going to not get in your way. I'm going to help. Now, children generally, up until about the age of 7, it takes them about that long to learn how to run a fever and, sort out their own kind of acutes. An acute, by the way, is something that starts and stops. It has an end point, either in life or death. The old books were very dramatic about that. You will either die or you will live after an acute. Whereas a chronic is something that usually starts slowly and has no tendency to resolve. So what happens is, if you stop all the acutes in their tracks by suppressing them. Now, I'm not talking about the kind of things that Dani and Cori are going to be talking about in terms of, supplements and herbs and stuff. But if you take medication to just stop what the body is doing in an acute situation, the body will eventually produce a chronic situation after that. And that has no tendency to resolve itself until you start using immune enhancing medicines. So what happens when people come to a homeopath or come to, alternative medicine for the first time is they have to relearn how to be sick. When I was a child, for every day that you were sick, you had another day off. It was normal to get a 2-week cert, for instance. And of course, back then, generally speaking, only one parent was working. So there wasn't the same pressure. I mean, I used to see mums in my practice who would give over their holidays to look after their kids. They couldn't take any more sick days. They were absolutely maxed out in terms of time off, and completely knackered. And that's wrong. It shouldn't be like that. And we have to take back control of, one of the things we have to do, taking back control of our health, is saying no to that system. No, we're not doing it. We need time. You need time to get better. And all the things we're going to talk about tonight help, there's no doubt. But what I'm saying to people is that very often taking time out, having a cold, is more than just about a physical symptom. Very often it is, you need a day out, like a duvet day or 2 days out from the world, where you can just get into bed, pull the duvet over your head and just be. And it's like giving yourself permission to do that.
Yes.
So that, and the other thing is that most adults who would come to me would not have had a fever. Like, they didn't know how to run an acute, because they hadn't been allowed, or hadn't allowed themselves to have a fever for years and years. So it takes time. You need to get into bed, pull up the duvet and wait. Keep yourself good and warm, and eventually, usually, you'll start to run a fever, which is a very good thing. And fevers have been demonized. It's like, oh my God, stop the fever, oh my God. But actually, everything our body does, it does for a reason. Fevers are there for a reason. You're trying to bake out the virus or the bacteria or whatever it is your body's trying to eliminate. And it's really important that you learn how to run a fever. And when you do, you will be able to be acutely sick very quickly. One of the things that I see is that people are afraid to be sick. It's like they feel that, okay, if I give in to this, will I ever get out of bed again? And of course, that's the other part of that, is that trusting that your immune response knows what to do. And I think the most shocking thing to me in the scandemic, if you like, was to see the number of people who had no idea what their body was doing, no trust that they had an immune response, that they could heal themselves, none of that. And that's something that we have to get back for sure.
We especially saw that when all of a sudden during the lockdowns, when there was no doctors open, no hospitals were letting no one, and then all of their people were at home, and when they didn't have access to go run to a doctor to get a script for antibiotics or run to a, they didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
They literally did not know what to do, and it was shocking. Like, it's like, have we come that far, that separated from ourselves, that people my age were like, oh my God, I've got a fever. And I'm like, good, go to bed, get some hot tea into you, warm up even more, right? Like, ride it out, you'll be fine. Take a salt bath, right?
Yeah.
They don't know.
They don't
know how to be sick.
Yeah. And it's important that you get in and have in your house the sort of things that you're going to need to help yourself as well. Because if you're lying there in bed, you're not going to get up and go to the, you know, go downtown or whatever. You need to have your first aid kit together and, you know, at hand. And the very sensible things that we say over and over: rest. You know, your body can't. People say, "Oh my God, I've no appetite." No, of course you don't have an appetite. Your body's busy doing something else. so don't feed it as well. You're getting a double job. Just chill, drink lots, rest lots, listen to what your body's asking you to do. And it is a matter of sort of growing this trust and realizing that, yes, you can do it. You can heal yourself. So, as you know, as anybody who's been listening to the homeopathy show particularly will know, homeopathy is a very individualized system of medicine. So there is no cure-all. There's no one remedy for any one condition. So it's hard to talk about coughs and colds and flus in terms of, oh, take this or take that or take the other. You have to match. What we're doing with homeopathy is we know that we have a vital force that is perfectly capable of healing itself when it's flowing. And what we're looking for with the remedy is something that's going to unblock the blockages. It's like a drain rod in a way. It's just going to unblock a blockage and allow your own healing energy to get on and do the job. So what I'm going to talk about are some of the remedies that we most commonly see in adults and two of the ones we more commonly see in children. And I'm just going to talk about my first experience with one of these, which is what convinced me to study homeopathy, actually. And it's the remedy gelsemium. And so, yeah, I was in my early 20s and very fit, riding horses all day, outside all day. And I started getting this flu. I was at, you know, had been riding and started feeling very sick and heavy. It's a big keynote of gelsemium. You just start to feel really heavy and achy. It's a very typical kind of flu symptom. And anyway, somebody gave me some gelsemium and said, go home, get into bed and take this. So I said, okay, I go home and get into bed, and I took it. And it was the most extraordinary experience. I remember it so well because it was completely different to taking an aspirin or any other kind of suppressive medicine. What I felt was I was like going into this kind of trance. And the pains were dissolving, the head pains and the body pains. And I was just lying there in this kind of sort of semi-conscious state. I knew that my body was healing. I just could feel there's something going on. I didn't get out of bed. I didn't want to. I was just lying there, just feeling what was going on. And it was amazing. And then I started to get, you know, to one of the things that one of the gelsemium symptoms is, you know, that chilliness before you get a fever. You run chills up and down your back, and you just, oh. So I was lying there, and the chills stopped, and the fever broke, and I went to sleep, and I woke up the next morning, and I was completely better. And it wasn't like, you know, you slowly come out. Very often people slowly come out of a flu and say, you know, yeah, I'm getting better, but it, you know, flu can take it out of you. It can take, you know, can take weeks actually. But if you get the right remedy at the right time, you can get very better very fast. And you know, I will have to say that at that, when I was that young, I was very good at fasting. I was very, you know, very active out in the air all the time. So I was a good bit healthier than I am 45 years later or whatever. So it's the first one to think of, gelsemium. It's your typical, very often when we're looking for a homeopathic remedy, we look at the mental emotional state of the person. Okay, so they say they have the flu kind of, everybody says they have flu, whether they have or they haven't, you know, that's beside the point.
It's become like the like,
every
you know,
cold is the flu. Yeah.
we call diapers all get called Pampers. A tissue is called a Kleenex. And every sickness is called a flu.
It's a flu. Yeah. It's a flu. It could be a man flu or a mother flu. It's a serious flu. If mother has a flu, you know you're talking about a flu. Sorry, guys. But anyway, it is sort of true. I think it's because guys don't have periods. You know, I think that's what it is. But anyway, we're used to pain.
Yeah.
Okay, so the gelsemium mental emotional state is apathy. You could care less. You feel absolutely exhausted. You just want to get to bed. You don't care what's going on. You're heavy, tired, pain, sore, achy pain from the small of the back right up, usually over the head. Not thirsty, you don't want anything. That's the gelsemium state. You just don't give a shit, you know, just get me to bed. Too heavy, too exhausted, too apathetic. That's gelsemium. It is actually a liver remedy. It's yellow. A lot of the old yellow flowers would have connections to the liver in old herbal medicine, but gelsemium is that yellow jasmine that comes in the spring. It's a great remedy for that sort of a flu. It's slow to develop as well, just to differentiate between the ones that I will talk about for the children, aconite and belladonna. Gelsemium, bryonia and eupatorium are the most common flu remedies for adults, and they come on slowly. The reason they come on slowly is because our vitality is not as sharp, if you like, as children's. Bryonia is the next one to talk about. And again, we look at the mental emotional state. So somebody has a flu, how are they behaving? But bryonia is so cranky, so bloody cranky. You don't want to ask them any questions. They don't want to be sick. Yeah, you know, you're just like, bryonia hates being sick. They hate not working. They're trying to be sitting on the bed, trying to do something, even though they're too sick. Don't want to answer questions, don't want to move. Their big keynote for bryonia is they are worse for any movement. Any movement absolutely does them in. So you'll find if they often have a flu that goes fairly quickly to the chest, and it produces that cough that is so sore, you'll find them holding the chest. They will hold themselves because they can't bear any movement. It's a very dry remedy. So the pleural cavity is very dry, and when the chest expands, there's a stitching kind of pain. They are very thirsty. They'll drink a lot, but they'll drink it in one go, like they drink a whole big glass in one go because they don't like moving. So always think of bryonia if somebody has something that is much worse for movement. And they're cranky, very cranky. And then we have eupatorium. Now that showed up quite a lot with the so-called, you know, the so-called COVID thing. And actually it's showing up again now. The eupatorium flu is one that produces pains in the bones, and they're really awful, the pains in the bones. when you have pain in the bones, it's very hard to ease it because it's, you know, putting a hot bottle or whatever, very hard to get to a bone. So you'll find that they're very restless. They can't get comfortable. They'll be tossing, turning around in the bed. And that is the main keynote for eupatorium. The pains, they have a flu, but the pains are more in the bones than they are in the muscles and the joints. Okay, so there are 3 of the adult type flu-y things. Okay, and like I say flu reservedly because everything will be called a flu until it's not. Now, 2 of the fast-acting flu remedies. One is our friend aconite. Do you remember we did aconite last week for shock and fright? So the aconite fever often comes on after a fright or a shock, or from getting chilled from being out in a cold east wind. And I had a neighbour when I lived up way up the mountains years ago, and there was an old farmer across the road who never went to Dublin once, I think, in her whole life, but she generally didn't travel. And she was very close to the land, and she would give me symptoms that were directly out of the old books because she had no other influences. And she often got an aconite fever. And she would say, oh, I was out in that cold wind and I've got a pain in my ear. And she was healthy enough, in other words, to produce exactly the
she
word
needed.
Theoria Medica. So yeah, aconite will come on very suddenly. It's actually one of the first remedies to think of in croup. Usually will come on around midnight. Sudden, anxious. The mental state of aconite will be anxious. They'll be anxious. Your kids actually, one of yours.
Aconite is one of our guys. I've got 2 of my kids who are aconite kids, and that croup, exactly, that was Quinlan when she all the time when she was little, and it would come on like that. Just it would go from 0 to 100 in a matter of an hour. And the aconite always worked.
Yeah, it's amazing because you know, with that group again, because it's often comes on around midnight. There's a lot of anxiety around it, both from the children and the parents, and they think they're going to die and all of that. Brilliant remedy for that. Brilliant. And the other fast-acting fever. Now, this is a fever remedy. Very often, parents say they don't. You know, they're afraid to let their child run a fever. Mostly because we have forgotten how to nurse a fever. And it takes a while for a child. The first fevers do need to be monitored, you know. The child needs to learn how to run a fever. Some children do it perfectly, but in others, the fever can get stuck in the head. And that's not good. That produces and can produce a belladonna state where a child goes into delirium. And it's so belladonna is for a sudden, fierce, head-centered fever. If you've any worries about a child having a fever, or in fact an intense earache, that's another thing they often get, really intense earache. Give them belladonna, and straight away, it doesn't stop the fever in the way that a pharma medicine would. What it does is it brings the fever to the place where it's meant to be, which is in the torso. And again, you know, we need to learn how to nurse somebody in a fever with tepid towels and sponging and just keeping the torso warm and encouraging the fever to stay where it's meant to be. Old school, says Nadia, absolutely. Old school, things that people always used to know how to do. Okay, so I'm just going to go through them again. Gelsemium for the adults, for the slow fever, for the slow flu. Gelsemium, the person with stereotypical symptoms, apathetic, heavy, sluggish, dull, don't care what's going on. They told us in college, I remember, I don't think it's really true, that I think I'd get out if the winning lotto numbers were waved at the bottom of your bed, if you're in a real gelsemium, you wouldn't be arsed to get out of bed to get them. I don't know if that's true. Okay, so gelsemium, bryonia, you can't move, any movement hurts, very cranky, you're just lying there, often very intense headache, even moving your eyes can hurt, coughing, you have to hold the chest. And then there's eupatorium, pains in the bones, pains that you can't get to, you have to keep moving, so restless, very, very restless. And then for the children, aconite, or for the younger ones, healthy adults will also produce these, but it's more common in children. Aconite for sudden onset fever around in the night, usually after a cold wind or getting chilled. And then belladonna for this sudden fierce fever that concentrates in the head. And the other thing I want to say is that when people start using homeopathy, first of all, sometimes they think that oh, somebody's sick, I have to give them a remedy. We wait, we watch. You don't have to give something all the time. If the body is if it's moving through process, then we would watch it and wait and, only intervene if it's stuck.
Let the body go through, and if it, like you say, if it gets stuck and it's not, or it's sliding backwards, if you will.
Yeah. So I think that's all I have to say. Does anybody want to ask me a question before
let's hold the questions to the end, Anne. Just so we can. I would prefer to get all the questions that we do it. I'll try and do it at the end. It's a little easier to maintain everything. Note questions down, everyone.
Ben is saying it's interesting. There's a time and mental state association with diagnosis in homeopathy. Really important for us. All of the materia medica produce times of action, and very important. The mental emotional state of the person will tell us no matter what is going on in the physical body. Yeah. So we wait, if you like, our choice of remedy on the mental emotional symptoms very often.
It's funny because the more I've read about and studied and researched Culpeper, I think that if he'd been born a couple hundred years later, he would have ended up being a homeopath. Yeah. Because it was all about the mental state for him. Mm-hmm. What time of day did the symptoms change, etc. He was that was very important to him on that. Yeah.
Very important. And don't underestimate stress, emotional stress.
Yep.
We have so much, as we've talked about before, so much to deal with at the moment, with all the disruptions, all the frequency disruptions, everything that's going on in the world. And emotional stress has a big part to play in acute sickness.
It absolutely does. Absolutely.
And I will just say, I will shut up shortly. One of the things that we also see is that if somebody has repeated colds and repeated suppression with antibiotics, if they develop coughs and they're suppressed, you will find then that the body will go and produce asthma, or usually asthma actually afterwards. So if a child has been put on repeated courses of antibiotics for colds and ear infections, the next thing, they start to go then into a pattern of chronic disease.
Yep, makes sense.
That you just described me. That was my whole childhood. Yep.
Yeah.
And I ended up with fibromyalgia.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's another one that we see so often that I think honestly comes from that massive suppression of symptoms, and the flip side of that being this massive overuse of all these drugs, antibiotics specifically. And I think that the fibromyalgia, ME, and MS, I think really that's one of the main trigger points for a lot of those things, where all of a sudden, poof, and the body just goes into this state.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, we could do a show on that. Definitely an expert.
Yeah, Definitely, we should. We'll put that on the list of topics that we need to cover.
The ever-growing list.
The ever-growing, it just keeps getting longer and longer and longer.
And would this be associated with adenoid and tonsil issues in as children? Ben says, of course. My tonsils were taken out almost routinely, you know. The tonsils
my adenoids were taken out when I was a toddler.
Yeah.
And I've had nothing but problems, if you will, since then with sinuses.
Yeah, so, you know, the medical profession has a lot of catching up to do in terms of body doesn't have spare parts, really. We didn't come with spare parts. They all do something, you know.
It'd be nice if they had some spare kneecaps. I really think that, that was always my longest joke for donkey's years, because I've had bad knees since I was a teenager. Of like, if God was actually omnipotent, he would have provided spare kneecaps.
Never mind teeth, Dani, teeth.
Okay, and teeth, yeah, and teeth, hips, and back, appendix.
And these days, even a thyroid. Yeah, you can live fine without a thyroid. Let's just take it out. Yeah.
That's another whole show as well. Oh, cool.
Yeah.
That's another whole show. So
okay, so that's me done for my
thank you, Anne, my darling. Cori, so I know we're going to talk about this kind of, you were saying you wanted to talk about somewhat the getting into the first aid of dealing with some of the stuff, but also you're going to talk on the kind of preventatives as well, right? How we actually prevent ourselves from getting sick, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that's the most important starting point, right? The foundation of how to not end up needing first aid or remedies or intervention as much as possible. I just want to remember to say, Anne was talking about the importance of resting when you're sick, and the immune system actually uses more energy than any other system in the body, and that's why you feel fatigued, and you actually need to give your immune system some TLC to let it do its job properly. So I don't want to forget to say that. On that note, though, chronically not getting enough rest is a major cause of the immune system not being able to function properly. So what does getting enough rest mean? That's an interesting question. You know, different people need different amounts of sleep, but keeping in mind that it's one of the basics. So I'm going to talk about the basic components of a strong immune system. You do most of your healing in your stage 4 sleep. That's when you mostly produce human growth hormone. And human growth hormone is what helps to repair damage in your body. So when you don't get adequate amounts of deep sleep, you're not healing well, which sets you up for being vulnerable to being sick, whatever, you know, sick ends up meaning in your body.
And it can end up being like that, like just catch-22, because you're sick, so you're not sleeping, so you're not healing, so your immune system's crippled, which means you don't sleep, and it just goes on like that. And it can go on like that for a long, long time.
Well, yeah, poor sleep, insomnia. So insomnia can be poor quality sleep, it can be interrupted sleep, it can be trouble falling asleep, trouble staying asleep, and it's very, very epidemic right now. So I would say out of every 10 patients I have, you know, 7 of them have some sleep issues, and different things cause it. Stress can cause it. So many people report that their mind doesn't shut off. So that can be caused by mineral deficiency, which can also create weakness in the immune system. So I'm going to talk about that. People sometimes have bladder issues that wake them up. And once they're, both men and women, right? And women that have had a lot of pregnancies, very often their bladder is hanging a little low, and they, you know, they can't hold as much because they have mechanical pressure. And men, you know, later on, many men have enlarged prostates, and then they're woken up in the middle of the night needing to urinate. And then some people can't fall back to sleep when they're interrupted. There's so many different causes of poor sleep. And then there's also the issue of how much sleep do you need? So, and it's different for different people. Some people do fine on 5 hours, and some people need 8 or 9. And I think it has to do with the quality of your sleep. So I have a whole video on sleep. I interviewed a sleep expert, but some of the things that help to improve your sleep, which help to strengthen your immune system, are getting blackout curtains, white noise if noises bother you, or just some kind of noise that actually distracts your brain from thinking can be very helpful. Getting all your EMF stuff shut down, and even putting something in that improves the frequency near where you're sleeping. So like I have a scalar energy pyramid that makes a huge difference for me. And then using sleep, natural sleep aids. So I slather myself in essential oils that relax my body, make me feel, you know, good. And I use topical CBD, and I sleep a lot better. I use minerals and things like that. So mineral deficiency is a very big problem that I'm going to talk about. So sleep is one thing. Obviously, eating, I say this for any topic that we talk about, I'm always going to say, if you're not eating clean, nutrient-dense foods, you're shortchanging your immune system. I mean, what does the immune system actually need in order to work? That's the point of having clean, nutrient-dense food. So people think of the immune system in terms of things like vitamins, people always think first vitamin C, vitamin D, zinc. There's a lot of other things that go into it, but like your antibodies, your blood cells, all of those things, they also need protein. And if you're not getting enough good quality protein, enough amino acids, your immune system is not going to have the stuff it needs to do its job. And I see a lot of, you know, hopefully not anybody in this group, but I see a lot of vegans that get sick very frequently just because they're not getting enough amino acids. So some vegans are really good at making sure they get all their amino acids, and others don't know how. And then the next thing is avoiding toxins, because people don't realize that the immune system handles toxins the same way it handles pathogens. Any incoming foreign invaders that the body feels threatened by, the immune system is going to be called to action. So whether that's a bacteria or a parasite or a fungus yeast, or if you think viruses exist, I am not saying they do or they don't, but people have, you know, viral symptoms. So anything that poses a threat to the body, including toxic heavy metals and toxic chemicals, will send the immune system into action. When you are exposed to toxins all the time, your immune system gets depleted. It's one of the causes of allergies, seasonal allergies, environmental allergies. That's your immune system just getting really confused because it starts seeing everything as a threat.
And when our immune system is literally dealing with this toxic overload, it's not going to do its job when it comes to the big, whether you're talking germs, viruses, what pathogens in general. If it's already struggling because of this massive toxic overload, then it's not going to respond well. It's not going to have the energy to respond well because it's already overloaded.
Right, exactly. So the more toxic you are, the more vulnerable you are to pathogens treating your body like a hotel. And that includes if you start feeding them. So if you're feeding them, the pathogens love sugar. So if you're feeding the pathogens, then it's not just a hotel, it's a 5-star hotel with gourmet, service.
All you can eat buffet.
Right. So that's, always the first line of defense is getting all sugar and refined carbs out of the diet. Do not feed your pathogens. People with chronic infections need to avoid sugar and refined carbohydrates as if they're poison.
Because they are.
Yeah, well, yeah. Yes. But so when I'm first starting to work with a patient, I wean them off of those foods. I gently wean them. But if they have a chronic infection, we can't be gentle. We can't really, wean so much as, start putting the pathogens into a state of starvation.
Cold turkey.
Yeah, as much as possible. And because we don't get resolution of chronic infections if we don't do that at all, just at all. So those are the basics that, in order to have a strongly functioning immune system and to let it do its job, to allow it to do its job, you need adequate sleep, you need a clean, nutrient-dense diet, and you need to avoid toxins. And then the stress that Anne mentioned, the stress hormones that you produce when you're under either acute severe stress or even chronic ongoing stress, those hormones suppress the immune function, like cortisol. So the adrenal glands, the stress glands, produce cortisol when you're under stress, and cortisol is like a steroid. It's a steroid hormone. If you take steroids, like prednisone or whatever, I don't know, I know it has a different name in Europe, something similar.
It is, I know, and the name's gone right out of my head at the moment too.
Prednisone or anyway, it sounds similar. If you take that, you suppress your immune system. You're setting yourself up to get sick. So, and all drugs are toxins anyway. All pharmaceuticals are toxins. So you set yourself up to get sick, but especially steroids, because they specifically suppress your immune system.
And then we talk about people with chronic problems like asthma, who are then given steroid-based inhalers that they're told use this 3-4 times a day, and it just suppress, and that chronic, like Anne was saying, it becomes a lifelong thing. Because there is no way for the body to lift out of it when you're feeding it the steroids.
I have a patient right now who had polyps and nasal polyps, and they surgically removed them, and they just grew right back. And she couldn't smell. She had no sense of smell. And the fact that she had no sense of smell affected her appetite because she couldn't really taste things, and she was losing weight. And they put her on inhalers, and they put her on steroids and some kind of biologic medication. And it didn't do anything for her. She
Nope.
still couldn't smell. She still wasn't eating. She was still losing weight. She felt horrible. So she came to see me. I got her on a program. I gave her some, some whole food supplements. She stopped all the drugs. She just stopped them. Voila, her smell came back. The drugs were actually stopping her sense of smell from coming back. Yeah, she put a review on my Google page about it. And that was going on for years. And just stopping the drugs, the smell came back. So they were actually creating the symptom with the drugs. And that's pretty common. You see that all the time.
Unfortunately, that's far too common. Like,
Yeah.
Far too common. And every drug ever any friends get that I've ever been given, etc., I go and do the read. And if you literally just read, it's very easy to find all the contraindications of the drug. And you can sit there and it'll be like, you've been given this for this type of infection. Oh, but guess what this causes? That type of infection. Insane.
Yeah. Iatrogenic disease is one of the biggest killers, and that is disease that is caused by medication.
Yep.
And hospital treatment, yes. Yeah, I love the commercials. You guys don't have them, and I don't think outside the US, but Advair for asthma may increase your risk of death due to asthma.
And people still take it though, with no questions. Do you know what I mean? The doctor says, "Here, take this." Okay, thank you.
I know. I could do a whole 2 hours just on stories about drugs that people have been put on that have caused crazy things to happen, and they didn't even end up being for the right diagnosis to begin with. So that's for another day.
Yes, definitely another day.
So then I just want to talk a little bit about mineral deficiency. I mentioned protein deficiency before and how that affects the immune system. The immune system needs some very specific minerals. Well, every system needs specific minerals. So the immune system needs some minerals that most people don't think about or know about. So the first thing I want to mention is zinc, because people do know about zinc, but minerals need to be taken in conjunction with each other. There's ratios that are needed by the body. So if you're taking zinc, you should also be taking copper. And by the way, copper is also an important immune mineral. Most people don't know that or think about it.
Yep.
Plus, it's really important if you want to have hair.
Yeah.
So I always if I'm putting somebody on zinc, I put them on a zinc copper complex. So they stay in balance. If you take too much zinc and not enough copper, you're going to end up with a copper deficiency. That's how that works. So for anybody in the States, I have a really good product called Zinc Complex. It also has iron in it. Iron, which people think about in terms of blood, they think about
hemoglobin. Yep.
Hemoglobin and preventing anemia, and bleeding causes a loss of iron. Iron is also an important immune nutrient, as well as important for thyroid function. So all these minerals have multi-functions in the body. They're not just for one thing. Another mineral that people don't think about or know about in terms of immune system is calcium.
Yep.
And calcium, there's so much false information about calcium. I had a patient recently who's vegan, who said to me, "What can I do to protect my bones? I'm starting to have some bone loss." And I said, "Well, let's get you on some good quality calcium." "Oh no, I will never take calcium." I'm like, "Why not?"
Why?
"Oh, you have to read the book Death by Calcium."
Oh my God. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Well, I bought the book because I wanted to see what the hell information she's getting. And so there's different, so minerals, in order for you to absorb them, have to be attached to an ion. That's why you'll see things like calcium citrate, calcium lactate, calcium carbonate, and then you see all these different now popular magnesiums, magnesium 3 and 8, magnesium, all these different magnesiums that people like. This magnesium is better for you. No, that magnesium is better for you. Okay, it's all freaking magnesium, but some of the ions are more absorbable by the body than others. So in order for you to absorb a mineral like calcium, the ion that it's attached to has to be, the body has to break it down into ions. That's how it works. The body has to break the calcium, not to get too technical, the body has to break the calcium down into something called calcium bicarbonate.
Yep.
Calcium bicarbonate is what the body uses, like that's what it can utilize. And calcium carbonate, which is the most commonly found form of calcium in over-the-counter supplements that people buy, doesn't break down into calcium bicarbonate. It ends up causing deposits. It can cause stones.
Yep.
Kidney stones, gallbladder stones. It can cause calcifications in your arteries, calcifications in your joints. So that's what that book is talking about. And that's true. I agree with that. They just don't specify what calcium they're talking about. It doesn't say, I looked through the whole book. I don't see them differentiating calcium lactate from calcium carbonate from, so anyway, calcium lactate is the most ionizable calcium, the most easily broken down by the body into calcium bicarbonate. And when the calcium is broken down into ions, it actually acts as a signaling agent to the immune system. So it's like flashing lights. It will surround pathogens and start flashing, you know, like smoke signals, ionic smoke signals. You know, hey, immune system, hey, white blood cells, macrophages that eat the pathogens, come over here. This is where you're needed. And then the immune system can be more direct and more specific and more efficient and handle the pathogens. When you have enough calcium bicarbonate stored in your tissue, which will get activated when you're sick, you don't actually end up needing a fever. Because the fever, the function of the fever is to make the body an inhospitable environment for the pathogens, which is a good thing, as Anne was saying. But you don't need the fever if you have the calcium. I've been taking calcium lactate for years. And I mean, it's been years since I've had a fever. And most of my patients, that's what we give patients when, like, they have kids who get fevers or anything like that. Just start feeding them the calcium. The fever goes down, but it's not suppressing it.
It's not suppressing it. It's making it unnecessary.
Right, exactly. That said, if you do get a fever, one of my favorite remedies, in addition to what Anne was talking about, is a fever bath. You can just look that up. You just get into a hot bath, as hot as you can stand it, and sweat it out. You could put Epsom salt in there too. Or
sea salt and a little borax and some lavender oil and maybe a drop of peppermint. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds good. I'd like to do that right now. And or a mustard foot bath, where you put some mustard powder in a pot of hot water, soak your feet in there, wrap yourself up in blankets, drink some hot herbal tea and sweat. All of that can help raise your body temperature enough so that the body doesn't need the fever anymore. Calcium lactate does work really well also, by the way, for hot flashes and for seizures, which are—
I didn't know that about hot flashes. Right.
Yeah. And also for seizures, which sometimes is localized, as Anne was mentioning, when you get the fever inside the head, or the temperature inside the brain is elevated. I have literally cured many seizure disorders just by putting some of these individuals are calcium deficient. And, you know, a lot of people think the best source of calcium is dairy. And that is a good source if you're drinking raw dairy.
Yes.
Which most people are not drinking. So dark green leafy vegetables are also a good source of calcium, cooked, though not raw. The other,
we could do a whole show on that exact topic of cooked, not raw, and why. I'm not going to get into that right now.
I know it's so hard not to talk about it, but we'll save it. The other, so those are the minerals I wanted to highlight. Vitamins, okay, everybody, you know, vitamin D is very popular right now. And vitamin D is very important for the immune system function as well as other functions in your body. Vitamin D is actually more like a hormone than a vitamin.
Yep.
It's kind of a unique vitamin. And by the way, the definition of vitamin is just something that your body, a nutrient that your body can't make, that you need to put in.
Through diet.
So,
yep.
Right. So, you know, a lot of people are vitamin D deficient. What does the sun do in relation to vitamin D? It converts the D from the inactive form to the active form that your body can utilize. So that's kind of why it's important. So the active form is vitamin D3. A lot of people are just taking vitamin D3 directly now. Now that's been getting some bad press lately also.
Yeah.
That vitamin D3 is, what are they calling it? A rat poison. I've been getting all these crazy emails about it. You know, I've been doing research and I found out that vitamin D3 is rat poison. Anyway, that's just silly because you need D3.
Vitamin D, yeah, no, I just.
But you don't want to overdose on it. It is a fat soluble vitamin. So that means you can take too much of it. Personally, I don't recommend that you take more than 5,000 IUs. And I can't convert that into milligrams. I can't.
No, I always got to be in units.
Yeah. So Nadia is asking what happens under a vapor canopy with canopy.
Nadia holding questions till the end.
She said for later. She said for later. I was just fascinated by that. Anyway, I'm thinking we're not going to need vitamin D with a vapor canopy. That's my theory. Another vitamin that doesn't get a lot of attention for immune support is vitamin A.
Yep.
Nobody ever talks about poor vitamin A, but that's also very important for your immune system. So I like to combine vitamin A and vitamin C. They work well together. They're synergistic. And vitamin C is the other one. So A, C, and D. A and D are both fat soluble, so you have to not overdose on them. C is water soluble, so you could take as much as you want, but you'll pee it out.
You just pee it out. Whatever your body's not going to use, it's gone.
Right. So with vitamin C, well, with all vitamins, the most important point I need to make about them is that, oh, by the way, and I didn't even say what the function of zinc is. Zinc helps to stop the replication of pathogens. So that's one of the reasons why it's important for your immune system. It also helps certain herbs get into the cells. Like I use artemisinin, which is also known as artemisia. Are you familiar with that one?
Yep.
Artemisinin is great for parasites and things like coronaviruses. Mm-hmm. And zinc helps to push the herbs into the cell. That's how back in the beginning of the pandemic, when people were like doing hydroxychloroquine, you know, if you took zinc with it, it worked better because the same thing, it helps the hydroxychloroquine into the cell. I
To
am not a
actually make
proponent.
it utilizable. Yeah.
Right. It's more utilizable. I am not a proponent of hydroxychloroquine or ivermectin or anything. So many people ask me questions about that. I don't use pharmaceuticals, period. I don't think it's necessary, period. Now, the thing is, all right, if what we're dealing with actually is, a bioweapon, maybe you do need to pull out bigger guns at times, but if you do the things that I'm saying as prevention, your body will be able to handle it. I think. I don't know. Who knows what they're going to end up making, but
that's another whole show too.
Right. So with vitamins, the most important point I want to make is that many people are taking vitamins that are either synthetic, meaning they're made in a lab, or super high dose, which are not biologically compatible with your body, because if the dose is not found in nature, it's too much for you. Or they're taking vitamins that are just a fraction of the vitamin complex. All vitamins are a complex. Vitamin C is a complex. There's a lot of different components to it.
Ooh.
Vitamin C is not ascorbic acid.
No. Oh, that is one of my, everyone's like, I take vitamin C. No, you're taking ascorbic acid. That's not the same thing. It's not the same thing. And
ascorbic acid
how do they say, like, I don't understand how it is they get to advertise this vitamin C, 100% pure ascorbic acid. And you're like,
right. And that is the most misunderstood vitamin that I know about. So ascorbic acid is only 2% of the vitamin C molecule. It's the outer antioxidant shell. Vitamin C has a whole bunch of other stuff in it: J factors, P factors, bioflavonoids, tyrosinase, which is an enzyme that allows you to actually absorb the nutrients. And you need the whole thing. Taking the ascorbic acid actually causes a deficiency of the other components. If you take a whole bunch of ascorbic acid and not the other stuff can't even bind. If it's entering your body, it can't bind. There's no room for it. So it actually ends up creating a deficiency. So I only use whole food vitamins, and I'll use combos. Like I have a great A and C that happens to be wonderful for the flu. And then I have one with added bioflavonoids that helps to strengthen your blood vessels also, and your gums. And, so this is one of the things that people don't understand about vitamins. Vitamin E, many people are just taking alpha tocopherol, but there's alpha and beta, and delta and gamma, and you need all of them.
Exactly.
And so Ben is asking about liposomal and methylated. So liposomal is just one of those, it's one of those marketing ploys. You need to be taking vitamins in the form that they appear in nature.
Yep.
You don't need them in liquids. Liquids don't absorb better. Otherwise, we would all be just living on liquid instead of eating food. And
they call them food state vitamins over here, Dani. Have you come across them?
What was that? Say that again, hon?
They call them food state vitamins over here.
Food state vitamins, yeah. So they call them whole food vitamins here. Yeah, so I'm sure it's the same thing. And methylated, the only people that need methylated, people who have the MTFHR genetic blip that can't methylate,
actually. Yeah.
That can't methylate folic acid. There's, a certain percentage of the population that has that. And
but not everyone. And the problem, we get people who all of a sudden they get all just like, well, I'm going to take this. It's like, but you don't need that. So it's just like a clickbait It's
It is. You can get a genetic test to see if you have it. Some of the symptoms of having MTHFR, because you can have it, like if you have it from both parents, then you have full-blown MTHFR. If you only inherited it from one, you'll have a minor case. So there's different combinations of how bad it is, but you'll have symptoms like anxiety and OCD and things like that. So that's what a folic acid deficiency can cause. And if you have those kind of symptoms, you can, instead of doing genetic testing, you could just try taking methylated folate and seeing if you feel better.
yeah.
That will answer that question.
Serious reactions to vaccination is another thing that is very likely.
Yeah.
MTHFR.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So I think I'm done.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna
Do you want to talk about the geranium?
Yes. Well, I'm doing some research because it was many years ago that I was researching that. I was looking at pictures after you sent it to me. I was like looking at pictures going, yes, I remember this little plant. Guess what Dani's going to grow next year?
It's really pretty.
It's a pretty plant. And if I remember correctly, it's got a very unique scent too. And it doesn't have the geranium in it like the Herb Robert, because Herb Robert's in the same family.
Oh, it is? Okay. So I was telling earlier today, Anne and Dani, about African geranium, which I use an extract of. A company in the States called Nature's Way makes it. And I just stumbled on it. I just saw it in my local health food store years ago, and I said, let me try this. And it just really helps. If you take it the minute you start feeling like you're getting sick, very often you just end up not getting sick. And I don't have any idea what the physiology is, how it works in the body. I just have all my patients have it on hand, and so many people swear by it. And I guess it's doing something to strengthen your immune system.
Geranium in general, that the entire family, of course, geraniums is a massive classification of plants. Like, it's not small. Everyone knows I love Rob Herbert. That's funny. Herb Robert. These are just spoonerisms. Which is geranium robertanium. Things like one of my most favorite essential oils is rose geranium. And I use it in a lot of things. And that's one of mine. Like when we talk about when you have the bath because you're feeling sick, lavender and rose geranium are in that bath 100% of the time, because that's one of those things that is fun. It is so soothing. There's something very, very healing about the geranium family. Of course, I'm talking about, dare I say it, wild geraniums, not the geraniums you're buying in the flower plant nursery.
They're pelargoniums, Dani.
Yes.
It's a different.
Yeah. So I'm going to talk a little bit about treating some of our symptoms. We were talking about colds and flus. And I'm going to kind of give a little basic rundown. The things that you have in your kitchen right now, the things that you have perhaps in your garden right now, because I like to always keep things relatively simple to what you can grab in a hurry. Because half the time when you get sick, you wake up in the morning and you go, and that is not the time where you want to go running out to go buy things to treat being sick. You want to have these things at home. So there's a few basic things that I'm going to talk about: herbs, plants, etc. And I want to bust a few little myths. So one of the first things I'm going to talk about is elderberries. Now, of course, I forgot to bring my elderberries in. I've got a whole big jar full of dehydrated elderberries I was going to bring in. Oh, well, no show and tell today. Elderberry season is over, right? And we've got like another whole, 5 months until we're going to have elderberry flowers again, and another 10 months until we see elderberries. Elderberries are absolutely fabulous for dealing with colds and flus. Flowers and berries, doesn't matter. Now, one of the things I get, because of course, when I'm teaching foraging classes, I always take people, especially in August, it's like, it's elderberry season. Let's go pick elderberries. People talk about making elderberry syrup and elderberry cordial for a cold, for the flu. And then they talk about, oh, it's because there's vitamin C. It's got so much vitamin C. It's so good for you. It's like, okay, we need to back up a tick. Vitamin C is fabulous, and yes, they're power-packed full of vitamin C, but the reason we take elderberries for a cold and a flu has nothing to do with the vitamin C. And when you boil your elderberries down for 2 hours to make a syrup or a cordial, you've pretty much wiped out all the vitamin C. There's actually a chemical component in elderberries and in the flowers that has been shown to knock out multiple strains of different types of viruses, especially the flu virus, especially the yield coronavirus. It actually comes at it right at a cellular level. It helps soothe your bronchioles. It helps soothe your chest, your breathing. It works all around. So you're not, it's one of the things I always want to point out. We're not taking elderberry cordial because it's got vitamin C. We're taking it because it's made of elderberries, which are super, super good at fighting off colds and flus. And asthma and seasonal allergies as well. Also works really, really well.
I think there's a lot of antioxidants in it as well.
A massive amount of antioxidants in it, like absolutely huge, right? So one of the other things, and it's what I call a stimulating. It's a stimulant, as in it stimulates not just to help soothe and heal, like when you're dealing with coughs and sore throats. It actually stimulates a response within your body to fight back. And this is now kind of well studied. So elderberries, and you can buy them. You can buy dried elderberry flowers multiple places. Dried elderberries, you can get multiple places. They're not expensive, so you can have them. I always have a massive jar of dried elderberries on hand, so I can make tea whenever I need it. I just like teaspoon in a cup, and away we go. So one of the other powerhouses is the one that we all know is garlic. Having said that, some people have a hard time digesting garlic. If you have ulcers, some people have a hard time, and which is one of those times that it might be worthwhile checking into doing fermented garlic. People who have digestive issues with raw or even cooked garlic, a lot of times they can take fermented garlic and have no digestive issues at all. So a little bit that some people don't really know about the garlic is that there's a chemical component in garlic. So I'll back up. A lot of people like, I should be taking garlic every day, and you should have garlic every day. It's fabulous for you. It makes you a little stinky, but whatever. They will take an entire clove. Obviously not the elephant cloves, because that would be huge, but like a little regular clove, and they'll swish it back with water. That doesn't help you, because garlic needs to be crushed. It needs to be bruised. It needs to be beaten up a little bit to develop one of the components from one chemical into another chemical, which is the allicin. I'm like, allicin? No, that's not. Allicin. That's not right. Allicin. You need it. So when you're going to take your garlic, whether you're going to put it into a decoction that you're making, like you're going to use it, make it into like a cough syrup, whether you're going to put it into your roast, your soups, etc., crush it and then let it sit on your cutting board for like 5-10 minutes before you eat it, before you cook it, etc. Makes a huge difference. The same thing if you're going to ferment your garlic, crush it first, let it sit for 10-15 minutes, then go through the process. You should always let your garlic sit for a good 10-15 minutes or so to let that bruising alter its composition into the good stuff that you really, really want to be healthy. Oh,
can I also say I do have enterically coated garlic for people that have trouble with it, and you digest it in your small intestine rather than your stomach, so
Yes.
it doesn't bother you. And also, to some degree, the hydrochloric acid in the stomach does denature the allicin a little bit. So, you know, but eating it in its natural form is very effective, and it's great for drainage. It's
Yes.
and parasites and bacteria hate garlic. So,
And that's like, it's in all over. That's the thing about garlic. It helps with draining mucus, whether you're talking in your chest, whether you're talking in your head, the back of your throat, ears. It's the same thing. It's like garlic oil. When you take, for anyone who's ever had chronic ear infections, and I'll talk about mullein in a second, I make raw, really good quality olive oil with garlic and mullein flowers, and those drops in the ears, and it will knock out ear infections. Seriously, will knock it out.
Dani, do you ever put a clove in your mouth going to bed?
I cannot. I have tried. I cannot. It's just too much. It's too much. I just can't do it. It's like, no, don't make me do it. No.
You know, I did it one time. I had a sore throat, and I said, oh, feck it, I'll just stick some garlic in my cheek going to sleep. I got up at some point during the night and put it on a table, got up and went, ooh, put it on the table. Boy, it stank the next day. It was amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Yeah, it's right through your body, like, whoa. That's it. If you put garlic on the soles of your feet, right? Like, that's one of those things. You cut thin slices of garlic, put them on your soles of your feet, put your socks on when you're sick. And when you make up in the morning, you will taste the garlic in your mouth. That's how well it penetrates through the body. And yes, all those nasty buggies and parasites, etc., really, really don't like garlic.
it's good for your heart too and your blood pressure.
It's good for your heart, for your blood pressure. It's good for someone who's got clotting issues, blood clotting issues. Really, really good for that. I want to back up on talking about the elderberry. Because last week when we were talking about grief and shock, we talked about St. John's wort, and we tend to think of St. John's wort as a antidepressant. That was
a powerful antiviral.
It is a incredibly powerful antiviral, and St. John's wort and elder together, the elderberries or the elderflowers, have got a very synergistic effect, and it is a very potent antiviral. So that's another one of those things that, like, we don't really think of. Like I said, people get caught in the mindset of, for one thing, vitamin C is for colds, calcium is for your bones, St. John's wort is because you're depressed. And no, like, it's got so many other things it's fabulous with. So I just want to back up and talk about that. When we talk about our stuff in our kitchen, ginger. Fresh ginger is a very potent antiviral, antibacterial. It helps you to really express up and get all the gunk out. It helps to loosen up the phlegm so that you can cough it out. It loosens, kind of loosens the mucus everywhere. So when you have problems with your intestinal tract, ginger is really, really good for that as well, all the way through. And fresh ginger is one of the few things I say to everyone. Okay, yeah, look, in an emergency, if you have dried ginger, like, so I always dehydrate ginger, thinly slice it, and I'll dehydrate for ease of chucking it into tea if I'm on the go. Fresh ginger, though, is far and away better than anything dried, anything tinctured, anything put into oil. And fresh ginger will keep in your fridge for quite a while. Fresh ginger is not expensive. You can always buy, if you live somewhere where you can't find fresh ginger in the grocery store, you need to find a better grocery store. You don't need a lot of it, right? So when we talk about, for example, fire cider, ginger is one of them. Ginger and the garlic are both one of the essential ingredients in fire cider that you make to help to keep you going through cold and flu season. And the thing about ginger, and this is a relatively newish study, And I do believe, because I eat a lot of ginger. I love fresh ginger. I can literally just, and pickled ginger. I like any ginger, I can just mow it down. Ginger inhibits viral and bacterial particles from sticking to your cells.
I just read that study too.
It is an amazing, well, I was like, oh, isn't that interesting? I had a friend of mine who literally swore, went through the whole last 3 years, and she literally has like an addiction to it. She will literally slice ginger and just eat it raw. And she says, like, I don't get sick. I don't ever get sick. No, I don't ever have allergies. I am never sick. And she swears it's because she eats ginger raw every day. And you can juice ginger too. Like, that's juice. If you got a good juicer, just throw a little bit of ginger in your juice. Apple, one of my favorites. Apple, red sweet pepper, and carrot.
Beetroot, Dani.
And ginger.
Apple, beetroot, ginger.
Yes, the apple, beetroot, ginger. Yeah, it's
Yum,
tasty. It's yummy. It's good for you.
A recent study also showed that it helps to reduce menstrual cramp pain.
Actually, I've just been reading about this too. My youngest daughter, she suffers quite badly with menstrual cramps. So I've been like, maybe I'm going to convince her to have some ginger tea, or I may just have to fill it into some capsules for her. So going on one of my busters, this is one of my cold busters that I swear by and have done for years, much to my children's dislike. And that is thyme and oregano. Everyone should have thyme in their kitchen. Everyone should have oregano in your kitchen, in your spice cupboard. By the way, if your thyme or your oregano are over a year old, dump it out and go buy some more. Dried herbs have a very short shelf life, and what I call like the kind of like the Mediterranean-ish herbs, your thyme, your rosemary, your oregano, your basil, etc. Once they hit a year old, they're not going to have much flavor left. There is certainly not going to have a lot of medical potency left. I say this about cloves as well. I'll talk about cloves in a second. The amount of people I know who are like, yeah, I've got some cloves in the cupboard. I'm like, how old is it? They're like, oh, I know. I think my mom gave it to me when I left home. Yeah, that was 12 years ago. Throw it away. Just throw it away. Spices and herbs don't last forever. You got to rotate through them, which is why I buy things in large quantities, because I do a lot of cooking and a lot of stuff. But certain things you don't buy in large quantity because, for example, your nutmeg, I buy in little tiny glass jars like this because you're only ever going to use a pinch. Same thing with when I'm dealing with dry cloves, little tiny amounts of it because you're only using a small amount. If you go and buy a massive big bag of it, the chances are you're not going to use it up before it's all gone. And a lot of us tend to hang on to things, even though they're out of date and they need to be thrown away. Thyme and oregano was literally, I learned about living in Malta. The first time I moved to Malta in the late 80s. Back then, when you had a chest cold, if you got a head cold, one of the first things they did is they would give you a cup of tea that was made with thyme and oregano in it. It tastes foul, literally unbelievably bad, no matter how much honey you put in it. But you will stop coughing virtually instantly. The sinus, any of the congestion is just like, whoa. There is a heat. And anyone who's ever taken oil of oregano knows, like, there's the heat of oregano. And that just brings out and clears. It opens up your bronchioles. It opens up your sinuses. It gives you the ability to breathe again. No, it's not tasty, but it is my first line of defense when I feel a cold that's coming on, and that's in this area here, is thyme and oregano. Now, I take black seed oil regularly, right? And I will literally, when I start getting sick, if you start feeling the scratchiness in the throat or the little bit of the burning up into the sinuses, I will take a tablespoon of black seed oil, add 2 drops of oil of oregano, and I will repeat that every 3 to 4 hours. And I have not had since, and I used to get bronchitis very, very badly every winter, and it would knock me out for 6 weeks every winter. Since I started doing that, I have never had bronchitis again. The black seed oil with oil of oregano in it. And just, again, it doesn't taste good. Not even a little bit. It tastes really bad. But it works like a charm. Thyme for sore throats makes a really good mouthwash. Like gargle. If you have a really, really sore throat, just put a teaspoon of dried thyme in a cup. Make a strong tea. Let it sit and steep until it's cool enough to put in comfortably in your mouth. Strain it off and gargle, and then swallow. But gargle that tea, and thyme tea will really, really help a lot with the sore throat. A pinch of cloves. This is the whole thing. We talk about dental stuff, right? We say cloves is a natural anesthetic. If you have a very sore throat, my go-to is thyme tea, and I steep it with some cloves in it. And the same thing, just that gargle, and that will ease a sore throat so quickly. And the thing with kids is, okay, convincing a 5-year-old to drink thyme tea is virtually impossible. But a lot of kids like clove. So if you can, you can make tea with cloves and add some honey to it to make it a little bit sweet. You can usually get kids to take that. Like they won't have a problem. And it really does calm the sore throat really, really quickly.
And for those of you who are lazy or just can't confront doing it, I have tinctures and mixtures that just don't taste that bad. Like I have a throat spray that has all that stuff in it, and it's not that bad. This has thyme in it. It's called Pulmonest. And
yep.
Yeah, I take the lazy way.
No, listen, and this is one thing. My whole thing is I try to give people the ideas of, like, when I first started doing shows and talking about all the health stuff, I said to people, I'm not going to talk about the wonderful rare fungus that grows on one rock in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea, because you know what? We're not there. You can't get it. So why do you need to know about it? Things that are grown in the Far East that you can't get over here, it doesn't help us. So I try to really stick with the things that, like I said, that for emergency first aid, that's in your garden or that's in your kitchen already, right? Most people will have cloves. Most people will have thyme and oregano. And we think about them for spaghetti. Well, the thyme and the oregano, not the cloves, obviously. You think about them for pasta, but you don't think about them for health. And they are literally amazingly good for colds. When I was in Morocco, if you have a really bad upset stomach, like bad indigestion, or the feeling like maybe you got a stomach flu, maybe coming on, literally they would make the really strong oregano tea, like a tablespoon of dried oregano, and steep it for 10 minutes, and then they would literally strain it off and be like, just drink it back. Just don't stop. Just drink it all back. And like it hits back, and it's like your whole chest goes boom with the heat. It's like the stomach, it just knocks everything out. It's like amazingly fast how well that works.
By the way, oregano is also a really good prebiotic. So it helps the gut to be able to support probiotics. A lot of people don't know that.
And fresh oregano is actually easy to grow. Ginger is not hard to grow. I was actually really, really upset. Last year, our polytunnel blew away in the middle of a windstorm, and my ginger died because I still had it in the polytunnel. But Ginger is not hard to grow. If you just have a summer, nice warm windowsill, takes 10 months to get it there, but it does not hard to grow. Oregano, not hard to grow. Thyme, oh my God, thyme and peppermint are like weeds. Once you have them in the garden, they're just going to run. So,
Dani, were you able to harvest ginger?
No, because like I said, that was when they were about 2 months away from being harvested, and the polytunnel blew away, and we had a hard freeze that night in the middle of the storm, and I lost my lemongrass, I lost my ginger, and I lost my turmeric. I lost like pepper plants and things like that, which
So sad.
here nor there. But it was like my lemongrass, my ginger, my turmeric. I was like,
yeah. I did try ginger at one point, but you know, it was like a pebble. There was nothing. There was nothing really usable.
But you know what? Even the rhizome is really, really good. I always say to people a lot, now the rhizomes are a lot more difficult to get at a grocery store. You really need to go to an Asian store to get them. If you find fresh ginger too much, the rhizomes have almost all the healing benefits, but it's milder. It's not so pungent a flavor, right? And that's I had a friend of mine who had a terrible time, and she didn't have a good enough windowsill that maintained warmth enough. But she just kept growing the rhizomes, and she ate the rhizomes all the time. And they grow. The rhizomes will actually go relatively quickly. Like it's not like it takes the full 10 months.
Yeah.
One of our other things, peppermint. Right? We all know about peppermint tea, and literally, how can someone not have peppermint tea at home? Peppermint is easy to come by. It's ridiculously easy to grow. There are 1,000 different varieties. So if like you don't like your garden gauge peppermint, go try a chocolate peppermint. Well, chocolate peppermint is absolutely fabulous, I will say. I have multiple breeds of peppermint growing in my garden. Spearmint is the side of peppermint. A lot of people who are not so keen on peppermint tea will love spearmint tea, or Moroccan mint is. So if you go get proper Moroccan mint tea, it's not peppermint, it's actually spearmint. And it's a breed from Morocco. And you can buy the seeds to grow it. I have a ton growing in my garden right now. Peppermint, on the nausea side, is one of the best herbs for nausea, for even the dizzy woosies. It is a very like type reaction, like it kind of centers you and grabs you. The smell hits you like right here, boom. And
yeah, it's good for headaches for that reason.
Brilliant for headaches for that reason. Yeah. But it is also really good. Besides all the stomach stuff, like whether it's intestinal, whether it's stomach, whether it's indigestion, diarrhea, or constipation, peppermint is really good. But besides that as well, colds and flu, again, peppermint tea is one of my go-tos. And a lot of times I will make a tea that is, for example, I love peppermint and thyme together. When you have a cold, the two of them act brilliantly. Peppermint is kind of cooling, thyme is warming, and they kind of come together, and they really, really kind of knock a lot of the coldish symptoms out of the park instantly. And the thing with peppermint is that it is so easy to get. And even children will drink peppermint tea. It's not offensive. It's not something that's like, oregano and thyme, which is a little potent. It is something that's easy to take. And you can also put peppermint and chamomile. When you have a cold, peppermint chamomile tea in the evenings. Very, very soothing. Both of them are extremely antiviral, antibacterial, anti-inflammatory, and overall just soothing, right? Just a soothing thing that you can get your hands on so easy without having to think, right? Like it's there. You can have it in your cupboard, or you can grab somebody. Here in England, the peppermint grows all year round. I can literally go out into my garden at any point in time during the year, even in the dead of winter, and find some fresh peppermint leaves to you. So yeah, and the only other last one I'm going to talk about when we talk about colds and flus, and because I can go on for bloody hours. I can talk about all these foraged plants that we can talk about plantain, and we can talk about more about the St. John's wort, etc. But I want to talk about is mullein. Mullein is the lung plant. It is, in my opinion, my go-to instantaneously when you start to feel the congestion, when you can start, whether, especially, mullein is not the dry cough. When you have that dry barking cough, that is not your mullein cough. Mullein is that chesty, rattly, like you cough and you can feel it rattling. The mucus is in your chest. You're trying to cough it up and you just can't loosen it. That's what mullein is for, whether you take it in tea or tincture. Mullein loosens the phlegm. It's a natural expectorant, and it loosens all the phlegm, whether it's up in your sinuses and you can't, the same thing when you're blowing your nose and you just can't get it to drain. Mullein brings everything out. And it is something that you can keep on hand. Like I said, you can have it dry, you can have it in tincture. Mullein and peppermint is my prime tea. For winter time, when you have a chesty cold, mullein and peppermint, and I'll put like a little piece of fresh ginger in there, is absolutely one of the best ways to bring up and get that out. And a lot of people don't understand. We had this conversation with a friend of mine who also has a natural health shop. And he had a young man who has been having a lot of breathing issues and the coughing, choking on lots of crap in his chest. And he gave him the mullein. And the guy called him up in a panic after taking my mullein tincture, saying, "Oh my God, I'm coughing and all this stuff has come out. It's giving me all this stuff." And he's like, "That's why you're taking the mullein.
To do.
That's what it does, is it makes it come out." "Oh, well, I just thought it was going to get rid of it." No, it doesn't have a little, believe it or not, we don't have magic wands.
It's not like drugs. It
doesn't. Boo. No, we have to actually cough it up, spit it out. That's how you get, and that is what mullein's for. And
can I also, I don't know if you have any experience with this, but if you add fenugreek to that, fenugreek thins the mucus and makes it easier to expectorate. And fenugreek has a lot, it actually also lowers blood sugar. It's good for breastfeeding. It helps milk production. So I use a lot of fenugreek also.
There's a side effect with fenugreek though.
What's that?
When you take it when you're nursing, and so you're taking quantities to help increase your milk supply, you start to smell.
Yeah, I know that. Yeah. I do.
I went through many months. My youngest son was like, oh, it's like a combination of maple syrup and celery.
Yeah. I don't like the smell at all, but it does. It's very effective.
But you take it for what you need it for, right? And the other, that's why when I do the mullein, I also do the ginger, because I find ginger does the same thing. It thins out that mucus and helps to make it that much easier to break it up and cough it all out.
I just want to mention one more herb that you don't know about because it's from Asia and you can't forage it or grow it, but it's called andrographis. And it's a really, it's an Asian herb. They use it a lot in Chinese medicine. It's a powerful antiviral. And I use a ton of that also. And I know it has a weird name, andrographis. But my body resonates with it. So I just take it every day. And then astragalus is great for chronic immune issues.
Yeah.
It's also really good if you're on chemo. For anybody on chemo, astragalus helps to protect your immune system. And then echinacea.
Echinacea is the one I was gonna do I got to draw the line in the list somewhere, right? You're like, do I got to do echinacea? Not, etc. Echinacea is another one. Yeah. It is brilliant, and echinacea should always be taken with the zinc complex. Because it kind of has a 1-2 punch when you take it with the zinc complex. So that's one of the other things I always tell people. If you're taking echinacea by itself, you're really only going to get about 20% of the benefits. When you take it with a zinc complex, you're going to get the full benefits of the echinacea plant. So
Yep.
echinacea you can grow in your garden, harvest it, and it's available everywhere. Like echinacea is another one of those herbs. While it's not a culinary herb, it is readily available in a lot of places.
And it binds to your endocannabinoid receptors, so it's like the benefit of
Yeah.
cannabis without doing cannabis. Yep.
Yep, exactly. So I am
That's
going to
it.
drop in a couple of, so what I will do is we are discussing creating a website, and that might happen in the next sometime before Christmas. We'll see how timing goes. To support the show. In the meantime, I'm going to be putting the video up. I will be putting up on RTS Earth, my main website. And Cori, if you want to, you put it up on your site if you're going to. I'm going to put a few recipes in place. So I'm going to put a recipe for fire cider. I'll put a recipe for my homemade cough drops things, which most kids are pretty okay with. Just a few little recipes that are going to be handy to have on hand. Things like even ratios of like herbs and that. I'll just put a few jotted notes in. Cori, if you can do me a favor, the plants that you had mentioned, etc. I'll just put a little article that will go out with this so that people will have a reference point, because sometimes we hear like, and same with you with the homeopathics, you hear the name, was it gel, just soothe, just see me, so if we just put all the names in, and then we'll make sure that people will have something written to refer to. I'm one of those people, I have to read it to really get it in my head.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to say that that's it for our presentation for this evening. We'll say goodbye to Video Land, and members can stick around. And if we have any questions, we will talk to you after this is over.